Alright, here's part 9 of this mini-series on tunnels. Yes, you guessed it. This does not look much like a tunnel, but I think it's time we talk about one more technique that we can use to import an animation that we might want to use perhaps as a displacement map or for many other reasons. And in this case, what I did, I have mentioned that you can load image sequences and you can also work with image sequences as a animated composition or do some compositing, not just on an existing animation that's loaded in the swap file, but you can also composite with a sequence, target sequence, for instance. So what I'd like to do is show you that particular technique, and you'll really want to learn a variety of approaches and different techniques to work with animations or image sequences, because at some point you'll find the one you like best, right? There are always a variety of different techniques to get to the same result. Many roads that lead to Rome, and one of them is going to be the one that you like best. So one thing I would like to do is first of all start from scratch here. Let's go with a new image. No animation quite yet. This is a small image, but doesn't matter. What we'll do is we'll load an animation. Let's say a sequence, and this example is really quite typical actually, that you may have an image sequence perhaps that was created in a 3D animation program or a 2D animation program such as Anime Studio, or Poser or Carrara, you name it. You have some image sequences, right? A sequence of files that represent frame by frame that animation. It could be a long one, a short one. And here is one that I created long ago in Poser. It must have been Poser 5 or 6 or something like that, really quite a while ago, and saved it as a Targa file sequence with blue background. So what I'll do is, one thing you might want to do first is just load 2 or 3 of those just to see is that really the right one, right? And you can see, you can scrub through that animation. You have the 5 frames here. And when you know that's the one, then you can go back in and spend the time loading the whole sequence. So let's go and load the sequence, and it still has that it still remembers the most recent selection of files. So you could, for instance, say you didn't want the first 3 files, but you want these 2 and then the rest of it. Or you can, just select them all, scroll down to include the entire sequence. I think I have 30 in this case. Yeah, the last image is number 29. So we have 0 being the first one. We have a total of 30 frames. And if we play this back at 30 frames per second or 30 FPS, it will take exactly a second to see it. So let's go load that. And OK this, and so now we have this animation, and the first thing we'll do is we'll store that, right? So let's go to store animation. This one is short enough or small enough, it doesn't take a lot of memory. We can put this into memory. That will be the fastest way to work with it. But you can also store that to a file, to disk, and that's the next best thing if you have a longer animation, or you just don't want to have this contribute to running out of memory anytime soon. So let's see what we do. What I like to do is create a different animation from this, and then composite the original one that's still on the file system as an image file sequence. So what I'll do here is perhaps I'll modify this to do something totally different. Actually, you know what? Let's create. That's actually not it. I don't want to work with this one. I want to create a different animation that's going to be then composited into it, but this one is going to be the foreground. That's what it is, right? So you have the blue parts here. It might be green screen, might be blue screen, or just plain black background, although there may be some black outlines here. And so that's why it's good to have a unique color that you can safely select to turn it transparent, and then the information behind it will be shown, but it won't start showing along the edges here, for instance. So what does it look like? Well, I mean, if we have an image, a single image in the swap buffer, let's say, for instance, here's the first image on the foreground, and I temporarily go to the swap buffer, and the swap image is showing you this plain white. Maybe I want that to be loaded with something else. We've seen so many different ways now to create animated backgrounds for the tunnel or the tunnel itself, or some backgrounds such as some starry skies. The neutrons is pretty neat. Let's just go with one of those and render that. So we have this animation sequence now in what we want to turn into the background, right? So this actually I could also store. Let's go store this animation to memory. It's small enough, and you can see now we have this little animation here. So let's say I want to actually turn this into a looping animation, because when you think about this one, the walking character, and actually I didn't mean to stay on the swap buffer. Let's go back to the main here. Okay, so here's the image sequence. That one is looping, right? You can keep going and it just keeps running and running and running forever. So we'd like to do the same thing with the background. Right now it's not. So there is a technique that we have to make this loopable, and that is called right click on the animation here and make loopable. Now when you do that, you're going to select a portion of the image that's at the end, this sequence here, for instance from here all the way to the end. I'm just doing this to highlight the selection here. So imagine this part here fading away gradually, and actually fading away as it's being replicated here over the same sequence, so somewhere around here, right? In other words, you will have these frames cut away and blended over these guys, gradually fading away, while these guys are gradually fading in. And then that will look like it's just continually going with no sudden jump or cut or something like that. So that's how you will make it loopable. But the side effect, of course, is that at the end we will be shorter by this many animations, this many frames that we will have cut out. And we will need to do a time stretch or extend it back to the original frame count if we want to make sure it has the same number of frames as we have in this animation. So let's do that. Let me just add to that. Instead of actually making it shorter by making it loopable, you could preemptively prepare for that or compensate by making it actually longer before you start making it loopable. Then after that, it may come back down to exactly the same number of frames you wanted, which is the one you currently have. So let's say we have 29 is the last image, so we have a total of 30 frames, and we want this to be a completely loopable animation. One thing you could do is just double it, and then when you make it loopable, bring it back down to half of that, and it's going to be the same number of frames in the end. So let's go double the number of frames. This is something you simply do with the time stretch. That's one way to do it, not the only way, but let's do that here in this case. I'll just times 2 and make sure we do frame blending for a little bit of transitional behavior here. Not too bad. It does have a little bit of strobing or a little bit of tearing, but that's okay. And now we can make this loopable. Let's go here, and here it is. As I said, you will have to say how many frames you want to sort of dedicate. You want to make it from which frame to the end, turn loopable as it fades those frames away over the incoming new ones at the beginning. So if you know you have a total of 60 frames, you could go to frame 30, and from here to the end it's going to take it all into the beginning. Right, 59 is the last one. Let's go from 30, and so now you have frames blending away. You have a total of 30. We have last frame is 29 again, the first frame is 0. We have still a total of 30 frames, but what you can see is that it's continually fading away the last set while fading in the new set at the beginning. And so in other words, you don't see, you can tell a repetitive pattern here because it's a very short-lived animation, but you don't see a cut, you don't see a jump, and that's what we do call a loopable animation. You can also make them seamless, by the way, and a seamless animation is something that can be very useful as well. So if you do a make seamless, you can say how much overlap you want on that left to right seam, and let's say we want about this much, or actually make it the max here. There you go. And so now we have a looping animation that's seamless, And of course it looks a bit more chaotic here, but when you make it seamless, what that means is that you can also start tiling or shifting around, and you won't see a cut, you won't see a seam. For instance, if you use the single image here, let me zoom in a little bit so we can see that better. If we use the single filter for transformation shift, right, grab the hand, you cannot tell where the cut is or where the seam is. It's seamless, right? And another thing you can also see when you go to the timeline, you can go to the transform timeline and apply the shift there. But another one you can also do is, where is it? 3D perspective. You can tilt this, and you cannot tell where the seam is. You may be able to see a repetitive pattern as you move around. You can see things repeat, but there isn't a sharp cut or a seam that is visible as such, because we've made it seamless. And it is also loopable, so this is a looping animation that's also seamless, and that's really a nice feature to have in Dog Waffle. So one thing I'll do is actually I'll make it in this orientation, or perhaps adjust a little bit, something like this. There you go, and apply that. And so now you have still a looping animation that you can keep looping, and there it is. So now let me undo that. I didn't want to really keep that. What I wanted to keep is an animation that's the same duration as the walking character, and we can now store this one, of course. Let's go store to this to memory as well, and restore the animation we have here. And now, how do we make sort of a composition between the two? Remember, we've done that, right? If we already have the animation loaded, we can simply use this here to use it as an animated swap. And then we can go here with the compositing capabilities to not displace. We did that in the last tutorial. To composite with swap using, for instance, the blue screen, or a color key and specifically pick the color. Blue screen, there it is. It sees that that is blue, and anything else is dark gray, light gray, and so on. And as you scrub through that, it's now compositing it with the animation that's in the swap buffer, so the animated swap image sequence, which it took here courtesy of this stored copy. And so that's how it's combining those two. And then you simply perhaps adjust a little bit the tolerance there, make sure it's not too transparent, because here you can see through it. You may want to adjust it so that, but make sure also that you don't give it too little tolerance, and then you have some of the blue edges showing. So it's good to see some sort of a middle ground in between here. And there's also sometimes some benefit here with the artificial blue. You can reduce that a little bit and get an even better, cleaner cut. Alright, so this is a way to composite if we already have the animation here. Now I want to show you really a different technique, and that's if you have the same animation but in an image file sequence. So let me take this animation here again, and there it is. And what I'll do is I'll save this to a file sequence, right? Targa image sequence. Simply do that here, animation, save sequence. And this one we will save into the same location as where we have our running man. I think that's on the desktop. And on the desktop I have my presentations. There you go. Come on. And there you go. And the running man is probably under the humans or animations. There it is. Come on, wakey wakey. Okay, maybe not. What is it? Is it not? Oh, maybe it's humans. No, see, I have other humans here, standing or walking. I was pretty sure it was here. Let's go in here one more time. Maybe not. Where is my running man? Let's look for... Oh, humans. No? That's where I was just a second ago. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? You know what? If you don't... oh, maybe animate a brush. Running man. Yes, there it is. Okay. So here is an animated sequence of the running man, and I want now a second animated sequence of some of that 30 frames background, the gray background that we created and turned looping as well. So let's go save that out in its own folder. It's a better way to identify it. running man background. Right, this is the background for the running man. Just as a reminder to myself that it's it has the same frame count and the same dimensions. The images are the same size. So that we will say, okay, so we call that BG as in background, and it will add a number to the sequence. Maybe we can add an underscore to that just in case it doesn't do that for us. And we can save it out as a Targa file or a PNG. That's a popular format. Let's do that. A PNG format. Let's go register that. And you see now it's going through the animation and saving each frame one by one, converting it to PNG, and creating this image sequence. Now, after we've done that, it's a good idea to check whether all these images are indeed there. One way you can do that easily is under animation, load sequence, go back to where we were before, and now we should see under anim brushes that there should be, oh, actually over here, you should see the running man. There it is. The running man was the original sequence with the running man, and here's the running man background, the new folder I created. And look at that, it actually added an underscore and the number sequence. So the underscore that I added was not really necessary. But we can load this one here, let's say 2 or 3 of those, just to get a quick test. And here they are, right? So here are 4 images of that sequence saved out to PNG. And I will now go into loading that entire sequence just to double check it again. Load sequence. And we cannot do this often enough. It's really good to verify that we really are aware of what the format is we're working with, that we are really looking at what we think it is these images contain. Alright, so now let's go back to this animation. This is our running man with some blue components. And that's where the blue needs to show the animation that's in the background. This time I'm showing you how to do that with the file sequence still on the file system, meaning we're not loading it into the animated swap image. Right now the swap image does contain 1 frame, but it's not animated anymore. I can clear that. Let's go and clear it like this to white and then switch back. And so if you scrub through that animated swap, oh no, look at that, it got replaced because here we still have this checkbox marked here, this checkmark boxed or checked. What we do is we undo that to make sure it's no longer taking this one as the animated swap. All right, that's why he was doing that. So let's go and erase it, and that should be done now. If we scrub through that, the animated swap should no longer be overriding the swap image, and there it is, it stays blank. Alright, so in other words, we don't have a swap image. We can blend the two together, nothing happens, nothing changes. If we blend them together in additive mode, of course it will, because there is all this white stuff and it will just totally saturate it to white. But what we want to do now is load the other image sequence that's still on file into the timeline and composite the two together. So what you see here is the filter for down here for compositing with an image sequence. There it is, right? And we can say let's do the blue screen sequence, meaning that if there is any blue components here, any blue colors here, it will take them for making that pixel transparent. Those pixels that are blue will become transparent, and the pixel value, the color that will show instead, is to be taken from this image sequence, and it will do that frame for frame. Alright, so let's do, for instance, the blue sequence. And of course, we will need to indicate what is the sequence, what is the file containing that sequence. So the nice thing here is that I saved it as a PNG so that Windows can actually show us what the images look like. Right? If it were a Targa image, it would not know. Windows doesn't know how to display a TGA file in the Windows Explorer. But we can still use it, of course. We can still work with it, just like we did, for instance, for the running man here. This is what it would look like, right? You just don't see what the image sequence is. You can right-click and maybe open it in something like Iframe view, just to double-check it, right? So, for instance, here when you open that in Iframe view or whatever your image viewer is, you can check. Yep, that's the one. But in this case, I'm going back to running man background. And because I saved it to PNG, or maybe you have saved it to what else? Bitmap, BMP, or JPEG. TIFF also. These formats we can actually see as thumbnails right inside of Windows Explorer. And so that's a nice format to use. It's just not the fastest because the native format that Dogwaffle uses by default is Targa. And it often will create a temporary file to then convert it to the PNG that you requested. Right, so that's why we have this file left in here. It's a temporary file saved by Dogwaffle, and then it converted it with ImageMagick that is included with Dogwaffle. It converts it to the format that you actually requested. Alright, and so what I'll do here now, I'll select the first one of that sequence. This is how that works, right? I'm still in the dialog here where I'm saying I want to identify an image sequence. Do that by selecting the sequence, the file that represents the start of the sequence. Typically that's index number 0. And so you select that and open, and so now you can go and scrub through that, and you see in the preview it's already picking those images one by one. And as you scrub through that, you will see the blue screen in action. This is what we're talking about, is to combine the blue from this animation here in the front with the pixels from the other animation from the file sequence. Right? So in this case now, you did not actually have to load the image sequence for the background into an animation. You did not have to store it. You did not have to have it as a single AVI file or DWA file or something like that. You can just keep them the way they are from the output of your animation program, such as Anime Studio or Carrara or Poser or DAZ Studio, whichever program you use for your 3D animation or for your sequences like these. You render that to an image sequence such as TIFF or PNG. You can now load that directly into Dogwaffle as a sequence to be blue screened or green screened or composited in many other ways. The image sequence, the file format here, there are a couple of formats supported. I think it does not include TIFF, actually, come to think of it. But you know, you try it out. You can always convert TIFF to Targa or to PNG or something else. I mean, assuming it is an 8-bit per channel TIFF image. TIFF can have many other color depths. But if you're dealing with this format, 8 bits for each of the red, green, and blue channels, you'll be able to convert it. In fact, you can do that with our batch processors or the general file converter or the batch browser. There's a couple of different places where you can convert images to other images, even in the sequence that's found inside a folder. And so at this point, I'm just going to composite these two together here. The sequence, I need to identify the first file, and there you go. And then as you scrub through that, it's good to go. You can again adjust how much tolerance you want to give to that thing, so it's partly transparent. You can also say no tolerance or very little, and again increase the artificial blue to get rid of some of those blue edges, and apply that. And so that's the final result right here. You have now recomposited a animation that you had initially here with an animation that you still have on a file system as in a folder as a sequence of images. And that is something you can of course also use for tunnels. Now this is not much of a tunnel, but it gives you an idea of some of the capabilities that you can use in Dogwaffle. So one thing I'll do just to finish this is I will use this to kind of create the walls of a tunnel with some openings. And one thing we could do is have some of these gray blobs, those circles, cut open as holes. So one thing I'll do first is make sure we have a little bit more contrast in this entire image sequence, so it's either very bright or very dark, and a little bit less of things in between. Let's first expand the dynamic range, something like this, so we have definitely some very bright parts and also some very dark parts. And then perhaps add a little bit more contrast. Under the filter adjust curves, you can change the distribution of the pixels so that it's a little bit more saturated to bright at the top and a little bit more saturated to dark at the bottom. So you can create very high contrast versions here. But you see that depending on how far we go with that, you can also still see a little bit of the mid-gray values, and those are the ones we want to open up as holes in the image for our tunnel walls. So animate that means we apply that to the entire sequence. And now we can take that for turning sort of a gray screen or a hole inside the walls. In fact, for the tunnel, if we use a tunnel filter, just a single image is what we need. So I'll do that with the, let's say, how do we do that? We can color key, we can composite, we can combine. We need, of course, an animation in the background. That's still there. Let's go and you know what? Let's apply this image. Let's go there. Let's go store this image. There you go. And now build the tunnel with that. All right. So we have filter, animated tunnel, and this one's going to be not rotating much, but we do want to move it. Just rotate a tiny little bit. Oh yeah. And of course, it's a bit nasty. It's a little bit noisy because it's a very small one and I'm zooming in so much. And this works better when you have something like 512 by 512 pixels in a square layout. But this will still be useful in the sense that we can also open up some holes around here. And we could go and do that simply by compositing now with the, there it is, with the color key that we pick right here. So you can pick a color, and if you pick the bright parts, those become transparent. If you pick the dark parts, those become transparent. And so you now have the animation behind it, or the image, it's a static image in this case, in the animation behind it, the image in the swap image showing in that composition. That animation, again, we could actually turn this one here, the blue walking sequence, as the background. So now we have the tunnel on top of this guy. And apply that, or perhaps adjust a little bit on those tolerance. Right, adjust a little bit like this. And go. And then we have perhaps some other things we need to do, like blur it or add some light diffusion. It's too sharp, too harsh right now here, so let's get some light diffusion going a little bit, like so. Apply that, apply it even more. And this is one perhaps I want to take it to the third dimension, which is of course puppy ray. Now I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Let's go to image and resample it upwards. Let's say double the size, click ×2, and so we now have this animation a little bit bigger. And I'm going to now take this, let's store it first, to disk. This time it's getting a little bit bigger. We don't need this in memory anymore. Let's get rid of the others. And so what you'll see here is we can take this for many other uses. We can take this now into an animated terrain. And perhaps before that I'll make it seamless. Seamless, like so. And so it's turned the whole thing seamless. And then I can go and turn this into a animation on the puppy ray tracer. Transform, something like this, there. And I'll use the GPU version because that allows me to just very nicely interactively scrub through all that. And so let's say we want to see that terrain like this, and perhaps a little bit global illumination. No, that's too much blue, unless we add the sky to a reddish tint. There you go. Perhaps also increase the brightness of the light. Change the position of the light. You see the shadows drop here. Add a little bit of pre-filter, looks like a bit of erosion, not too much. And adjust the fog a tiny little bit so we see even farther. Right, something like this. Alright, so that will be an interesting animation, but the image itself, the sequence, is animated too. So what we need to do under more, click on more here to see more options, to say animate each frame. So what you want to do is first prepare the animation without that enabled, because the moment you enable this is actually going to start damaging the original animation wherever it does the ray tracing on it. So what you want to do is that not to happen yet until you're ready to do the final render. So let's say we want to see the position change a little bit, something like this, and like so, and keyframe that, and then we'll go to a little bit forward like this and a little bit sideways turn, but then also move forward like so, something like that. Okay, add that as a keyframe, so we now have an animation in puppy ray that's going to move the camera like so, And you can see here this dude is still running and walking, and the terrain is subject to those changes, but in this preview it's not using it yet. It's just using the original image as the terrain elevation map. However, we can change that now. We can go and animate each frame, and there's a little warning that that's going to potentially mess with your image. If you keep scrubbing through that, right, it's going to start modifying the frames of that animation. And instead now we'll simply go to the final render, and we can click animate and make sure you make this the final render quality, and there you go. So now you see this render. The walking man is being used as, or the running man is being used as an animated terrain elevation map. Did I mention that we can have fun with that too? Alright, thanks for watching.